I remember thinking about all the things that I would do. It's funny how quickly that boy became you. Sitting here drinking away all the things that I'd have done, while the moments slip away and another one comes.
Welcome to Elder Tales. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Corrin. The appearance of things often hides the trauma and richness that lies beneath. Giving time, support, and language to help lift the veneer and explore our authentic lives and relationships can be challenging, but so rewarding, a path to flourishing as humans. This story from my collection of award-winning short fiction, This Old Stick, explores that journey for Bob and Irene. This is Hauntings. My name is Irene McNamara, and I'm an alcoholic. I have terminal cancer. I can play Lacrimosa by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. I envy those who have something to define themselves by, and I can only imagine what it must be like to stand confidently behind one of those statements. I know, I've got one. I will be 55 next week. There you go. I may not be addicted, dying, or talented, but I know with confidence how old I am, and for what. 55 years of living. No, existing. And what do I have to show for it? A mortgage, an estranged daughter, and a husband whom I thought was duller than the tarnished collection of silver spoons we got for a wedding present, which now hang tauntingly in our dining room. The house is a 1950s state house that the Railways Corporation bought as accommodation for drivers like Bob. Red brick and tile, quarter-acre section backing onto the siding yards. Nothing much had changed on the outside in 30 years. Railways ran into some debt issues and sold off some of their houses after a few years. Bob and I managed to rustle together a deposit and joined the line at the bank in our best Sunday outfits to plead with the bank manager to lend us the balance. We never had any money left over to make major changes to the house. I would have liked to replace the coarse brown carpet with something more appealing to walk on barefoot. The kitchen was dark and dated, and the walls of the bedrooms were victims of a perpetual battle with mould. The best we could do was slap on another coat of paint to cover the peeling and musty signs of age and damp. The spoons hang on a patch of wall that Bob punched a hole in 7 years ago. He says he can't remember why, and never gets round to fixing it, so it sits there like a permanent reminder and threat of whatever it was he was making a point about. He may not remember, but I do. Like it was yesterday. Janie had come home late with love bites all over her neck and a beer-fueled attitude to match Bob's combination of hidden worry and uncontrollable anger at another grounding she had ignored. He had always wanted to be a father and wept with joy when Janie was born. But long hours on the trains up and down the country took him away from us. His parenting amounted to reminding his daughter and me that he was the breadwinner and disciplinarian. Janie inherited her father's volatile nature, so the two clashed on the rare but intense times they happened to be home at the same time. I feel sad that I could never help Bob show Janie his simple delight in her. That night he hit the wall, and not her, thank God, but the damage was just as bad. Janie left the next morning to live with her boyfriend, and they are now somewhere in North Queensland, according to my sister. Bob's temper seemed to settle after that, and we both retreated into what became the dull routines of our lives. Him off to shunting at the yards from 7 to 5, then watching TV from his yellow lazy boy, cushions moulded and worn to his overweight shape, until stumbling to bed sometime after I had left him to it. Me with the challenge of getting the household chores completed by lunchtime to free up the afternoon for reading. That was my escape from dullness. And it came in varied guises. The mysteries of P.D. James, the romance of Judith McNaught, even the sci-fi of Orson Scott Card. Bob's dullness was shockingly rubbed out and replaced by glaring intensity at 3:31 last Thursday morning. I remember the time precisely because it was flashing at me in a bold red-on-black screen as he held the digital clock with a look of rage and panic on his stubble and diesel-stained face. The following Monday, Bob and I sit in Dr. Fisk's office. The doctor's half-drunk cup of tea is sitting next to his computer. Details of my past visits stare back at us accusingly from the screen while we wait for the doctor to return. Dr. Fisk has called us in from the waiting area while he dashes out to attend to some emergency or other. It has taken all of my will, with threats and supplications, to get Bob to come with me today. "I'm not going to talk to anyone about my business," he had argued at breakfast time after the 3:31 episode. "It's our private business, and that's how it's going to stay." Routines. He would wait until he heard me pour water into his coffee cup before emerging from his bedroom on the other side of the kitchen to mine, electric shaver and underwear. Breakfast at the aged and scratched kitchen bench was usually over as quickly as possible so that we could avoid each other. But this morning, time stretched out as he sullenly stirred his milky coffee, attacking the insides of the cup like he was trying to beat off its stains. Perhaps it was my shrieking, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," last night that had caused him to shut down more than usual. The neighbours would have heard his shouts and my screams, but I didn't expect them to take any notice. So long as we keep to ourselves, no one needs to stick their nose in. That's how our community works, and whispered gossip over bingo or beers is how we care for each other. "If you don't come with me to see Dr. Fisk, I'm leaving," I said into the loaded silence once he had put his spoon down. My heart was still racing and my fingers trembling, but my back was to him as I tended to the stove with my own combination of fear and anger. Appearances were important to Bob. He had never recovered from Janie leaving us and how the neighbours talked about it. His privacy meant we barely talked about that or any other meaningful part of our lives. We shared a house and meal times, but that was about it. Not even a bed. I knew that my threat would at least get him to the doctor's office, but whether he would talk now we were here was his business, to use his favourite phrase. Dr. Fisk bustles in, pulling off stained latex gloves, throwing them into the bin and brushing the dusty residue from his hands onto the back of his trousers. He always seems to be in a hurry, but once he closes the door and sits down turning to face us, his searching eyes below a permanently furrowed brow, it seems like the world and time has stopped. "Bob, it's good to see you with Irene today," he opens. "I can't remember when I last saw you. What brings you two in this morning?" I look across to Bob, knowing what I'll see. He's looking down at his worn hands, pulling at the crusty, damaged skin, his way of avoiding and protesting. I look back to Dr. Fisk. "Dr. Fisk, we had something happen last week, and we don't know what to do about it," I offer. I don't know how to talk about it, and I hope Dr. Fisk will sense from the long pause that he needs to help. He does. He asks the right questions, gives Bob a chance to talk about what he thought had happened, and asks me about what I saw and felt, then asks Bob if he agrees there's a problem. Bob had stunned me on Thursday night after he had put down the clock and collapsed into a seated position on the bedroom floor. In a strained voice he had accused me of sleeping with a ghost. I thought you might end up being unfaithful, what with all those ideas you get from your books," he had stammered. "But not with a bloody ghost." The outburst had been at once so outrageous and hilarious that I'd felt a conflict of emotions catch and compete in my chest. Fear for my life had won out. "Don't you dare accuse me of being unfaithful, and don't you dare raise your hand at me," I shouted back with surprising intensity. He was still slumped on the floor as his hesitant words had seemed to wrestle their way out. "I would never hurt you, Irene." He paused and raised his strained eyes to mine before looking down to his hands again. "I hear you moaning every night. I come in to check on you and pull the sheets back up, but you never wake up for me. This time I thought there was something in bed with you. I couldn't see it, but that was what the clock was for."
The ghost wasn't mentioned again in the days that followed, but thankfully Dr. Fisk manages to get him talking.
"When I come in to check on Irene in her bed, there she is, getting frisky with him," he explains to the doctor.
I've never heard him talk like this. Something seems to have snapped in his thick, resistant head, and now it's all coming out.
"She barely looks at me anymore, let alone touches me."
He's back to picking at his hands, but this time it's different.
"She's moaning and writhing in bed with this thing I can't see. But I know he's there, and she just finishes with a look on her face, stays asleep, and never talks about it to me."
Dr. Fisk looks at us as he says, "I sense there's a lot of deep feeling for both of you that needs to be unpacked." He pauses, then continues when we remain silent. "Bob, I've been treating Irene for a condition called nocturnal myoclonus, not very successfully as it turns out. The jerking of her body and the groans are something she can't control and are probably due to a combination of fatigue and stress." Bob finally raises his eyes and fixes his troubled gaze on the doctor.
"So there's no ghost?"
His voice has lost its strength, but seems no less intense to me. "There's no ghost, Bob," I say. "But I didn't know you felt that way." Bob looks back at his hands again, and Dr. Fisk quietly watches us. He turns and looks at the computer while he types some notes, then picks up a page from his printer. "Bob, this is a referral for you and Irene." Oh, I'm so grateful to Dr. Fisk for that little, seemingly insignificant choice to give the piece of paper to Bob. "This counsellor has a lot of experience in helping couples sort out things like this," says Dr. Fisk, "and I think they'll be just what you both need." Bob looks like he's thinking about objecting, his business, private, and all that, but Dr. Fisk intervenes. "I can see you and Irene both care about each other, and you've been through some pretty tough times in the past." We both nod. I can see Bob in the corner of my eye look up at Dr. Fisk, who finishes, "This will help set you up for a happier life together." We leave the consultation room together, but still apart. I know this won't be easy for either of us, but in the corridor I grab Bob's ragged hand and look at the man I thought I knew. No longer so dull. And I know I might need some rewriting as a wife. "Thank you, Bob," I whisper. I squeeze his hand, and he stares straight ahead in silence for a moment. Then, in a quiet, unsteady voice, he says, "I want to fix that wall today."
This part of growing